Hi everybody, thanks for coming, and my apologies for the delays and confusion, so we'll kick off, and don't worry, I'll still stay within the time, so we'll fire through. I'll keep it my pace, if that's okay, so everybody can see them a little bit better. So I'm Una Buckley, I'm the founder of Dyslexia Live, so we work with students with learning difficulties, so mainly dyslexia, autism, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. We take younger kids, older kids and adults in as well. So today's event is just, I suppose, some practical tips and suggestions. Home, homework, college, workplace. I know we have a variety of age groups, so I'll try and tailor to everybody's needs. And we'll just go through the content as best as we can. Just some overview stuff. Obviously, if everybody can put their phone on silence, that would be great. And obviously, if we do question and answers at the end, so if anybody has individual questions, feel free to ask me towards the end, or else you can follow up and send us an email, no problem, if you don't have the time to do today. So as I mentioned, we work with all age groups. I suppose our main involvement is about the holistic side to learning. So how do we incorporate the curriculum but also maintaining somebody's wellness and well-being? So as we know, I suppose a learning difference goes hand in hand with a mental health difficulty, and that's proven by scientific studies. So generally, anxiety and stress levels are higher in people that have learning differences. So it's about maintaining that overall well-being, but also moving through a curriculum or a course in the best shape as possible. We carry out assessments, we do a parent group, we have lots of workshop and courses, so much we'll talk through today if anybody's interested in some other free webinars, and we have some booklets and bits and pieces that we'll all go through from there. Okay, so a range of one-to-one, and we also do business on campus as well, and bits and pieces only for a small group of kids. We generally don't do large camps because there's just too many things going on. We've been very fortunate to work with many organisations over the last coming years, both universities, so our guest lecturing universities on the area of diversity and inclusion, but also we work with sister technology companies and a range of different organisations, but we're also a standalone organisation as well. This is some of our details if anybody wants to get in touch. So our email address, we're also on our social media channels, obviously like most people, and our website. So, just as a flag, so we do have an upcoming workshop that we're doing online. It's a belonging workshop. It's towards the end of October. We have education psychologists, academic experts, lots of range of guest panel speakers will be on that. So if anybody's interested in that further on, you can go on to our website as well to register. It'll be free. It'll only just be for an hour in the evening towards the end. It's about 2 weeks' time. So it's available to log into at home if that was of interest to people. And then also, as we know, so October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, so that's why we're doing this, to raise as much awareness and scope as possible. We have some booklets today, and we also have them on our website, as we won't be giving them to everybody, unfortunately, but we have them on our site as well. So an overview, we'll just do a little bit of background, an overview of learning differences. So just as a show of hands, is everybody kind of looking for the dyslexia space, or is there kind of a crossover with dysgraphia, dyscalculia? No, mainly dyslexia? Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're kind of doing an overview of learning differences in a sense, so that people know the differentiation between some of them, and because there's a lot of kind of misconceptions, we'll be looking at some top tips and just kind of a summary and an overview. We do have a poll question. We're not going to go through this at the moment, guys, if that's okay, just for the time, but if anybody wants to go on, we have a series of questions on our social media channel, and then there's a prize at the end and all that type of stuff. Okay, so an overview of learning differences. So dyslexia, we'll go through all of these in a little bit more as well, but dyslexia, I suppose, is a common kind of like what we call a poster person for learning differences. Lots of people are aware of dyslexia, but maybe don't know its consistent implications or don't know how it manifests. In each student or in each person, dyslexia can be drastically different. So one person's dyslexia may not be the same as another person, which makes it so hard for teachers, and it makes it so hard in the workplace to accommodate people of different needs, because quite often they don't understand what the differences are between the different ranges of dyslexia. I myself am dyslexic, and I also have dysgraphia, which we'll go on to next. So dysgraphia is a communication between your brain and your hand. So it's that you think faster than you'll ever be able to write. So initially your first few lines of a sentence or of a paragraph can be really legible, really hard to spot in younger students because they're not writing a huge amount. but generally as they move through to secondary school, you can see the handwriting deteriorate down the page, and then by the time they get to maybe a leaving cert or a fifth year essay, it can be totally illegible. So that would be some of the common signs around dysgraphia. Dyscalculia is kind of like an up and coming name, let's say, so not a lot of people know, particularly unfortunately teachers, know about dyscalculia. So dyscalculia is like dyslexia for maths, is a simple way of putting it. So number reversals, immense difficulty learning off times tables, multiplication, division, addition, more than what would normally be there. So if it takes, obviously amount of time for a student to learn new concepts and pick up new concepts, but dyscalculia obviously is a huge struggle in the area of maths and difficulties. It's important to note that a student can have dyscalculia and also have areas of difficulty in their English. So it's not just totally obsolete to maths in a sense. There can be overlaps as well with the English, and it's important to note that obviously a student can't have all of these together as well. So, there can be an immense amount of difficulties, often masked or hidden under the surface or often misdiagnosed. Dysgraphia is detected by an occupational therapist. Dyslexia is carried out usually by an educational psychologist, and dyscalculia is a mix, so usually educational psychologists can still only carry out dyscalculia and formal assessments. ADHD, dyspraxia, executive functioning and non-verbal learning difficulties, we won't do a lot on today, but obviously there are common learning difficulties that take place, and ADHD obviously is a further complexity and definitely growing in terms of awareness, which is really important. Dysgraphia or dyspraxia is more the coordination difficulties, so balance, coordination, catching balls, swimming, tying shoelaces, all of those executive functioning skills, and then non-verbal as well. So we won't do a lot of neuroscience because we don't have the time, and I won't be going into the executive side of how our brains work. But generally, we have two parts of our brain. Hopefully some people know that. We have our left and our right side. And our right side is usually the more kind of intuitive, creative, coming up with new concepts and ideas, and the left side is more kind of logic, reasoning, the academic base. Somebody with a learning difference may operate in more than one side than the other, but generally with a learning difference, the crossover between the two is slightly delayed. So what we need is we need both parts of the brain to work at an executive kind of functioning level, and often that isn't the case with someone with a learning difference. There might be a slight delay in those cross wires. So you can imagine they need to kind of like interlope. So I suppose what we would do when we work with students is we want to create as many cross-pollinations between different parts of the brains to create more connections. So anything that involves crossing over different parts of the body really, really helps. That's why art and gymnastics and dancing, all of those things can be really good for students with learning differences. Even though they might be challenging, it's kind of rewiring the brain in a sense. So common misconceptions or common areas of difficulty, B's and Q's and P's and D's. B's and D's, P's and Q's. For myself, B's and D's were a total nightmare. Never had any issues with P's and Q's, don't really know why. But B's and D's had to be, it was a very, very tough struggle in my house when I was growing up. We still see this in students. There isn't as much emphasis on the correction side of this at a really young age anymore because they're still kind of common red flags. So if a student is still kind of mixing these up by the maybe 8, 9, there definitely is something there to still relook at. It's the exposure to the letters as much as possible. So if a child is reading or actively looking at signs and posters and very verbal and interactive and they're still making common kind of mistakes, then there's definitely still some warrant for further investigation. There's a lot of information on this slide, so my apologies, and we won't go through everything. It's just kind of grouped into different sections and different colours. Some we've already looked at. So left and right confusion can often be a clear indicator, and maybe not as well. It's important to note that some of these are red flags, but lots of people have difficulties with their left and right and don't have dyslexia or a learning difference. So it's important that everybody doesn't feel like they go away and like, oh, I'll diagnose myself, which can often happen. People do have difficulties in certain areas, and that doesn't mean they have X, Y, Z or a label. It usually is what we call like a functioning aspect or a grouping of all of these. So if we have these like 4 or 5 things and they're commonly reoccurring and we've intervention strategies to try and make it a bit better and they're still not working, then that's where there's something else going on that we need to figure out. Getting lost easily, so I go down the corridor, turn left, turn right, take something out of the cupboard in school. So that being difficult for a student can often be a challenge. Difficulties telling the time, so clock, analog and digital can be a really, really challenge. That can be, very, very difficult to pick up. And the movement in a curriculum base now anymore, unfortunately, is doing analog quite quickly and then moving straight into digital because we're surrounded by digital, and lots of students will kind of bypass the analog stage a little. So understanding that concept can be challenging. Dates, times tables, alphabets, sequencing, so learning off maybe dance moves in a particular order, and doing them to the beat of something, so sound linked to a movement. Note taking, organisation can be a massive one, so obviously getting organised, school bags, lunches, forgetting things, leaving jackets behind at school parties, they can all be things that are prevalent and evident. And difficulty getting ideas down to a paper, so facing a blank white page or facing a blank page on a computer screen can be really challenging as to articulate where do we even start and how do we even finish. Strengths associated with dyslexia, more importantly. So thankfully this is becoming more and more known about the areas of strengths, but also the areas that need a little bit more help and a little bit more involvement with. Definitely creativity, big picture thinking, problem solving, again we won't go through all of these, empathy, practical, emotional intelligence, and ability to teach others. You'll find that a lot of dyslexics and people, that have a learning difference really enjoy that interactive element, because that's maybe usually how they learn themselves. So somebody, sitting down with them and telling them something else, and you'll find that once they get something, they really like to share that with somebody else, because it usually took them an awful lot more effort to get that concept. So they might teach another kid into school or help somebody else out with homework in secondary school because they already feel like they understand it, so they can teach others. So the strengths area is definitely kind of evolving, and there's more and more strengths being detected with learning differences, which is really important because yes, there are challenges and it's by no means an easy path, but there are a fabulous amount of positive traits too, but often aren't visible until you finish the education system. Dyspraxia, again we're kind of split into segregated headings here, so physical, speech, language, sensory, social, organisation, concentration. Eye movement and eye tracking can be really difficult, so going on a line, let's say a reading, and then going to the next line. So skipping over sentences, skipping over paragraphs is a common misconception. Memory, or short-term and a long-term memory, can be affected depending upon level of recall rates. So for instance, obviously learning off spellings, as most students still do, which is still proven as not a useful method of teaching and not a useful method of learning. On a Friday, they may still get really well. By a Sunday, their chances of recall is very minimal, if any. They might even get half a spelling right, depending on how it was taught that week. And sensory, so light sensitivity, noise. This was a common, I suppose, tie-in with ADHD or autism previously, but they're rediscovering that actually people with different various ranges of learning differences can be sensitive to stuff. So labels, feels, touches, loud noises, all of those types of things can also be evident, especially in a child in a classroom environment. Dyscalculia. So as I said, there's an overlap with maths, but also can be difficulties then in English. So spelling, telling time, poor understanding of signs and symbols. So like learning to drive and picking up driving tests can be quite challenging because signs and symbols are kind of everywhere. Recognizing patterns, and posture and fatigue. So this again was commonly misassociated with dyspraxia, posture, being able to hold yourself. Now obviously this can illustrate in lots of different ways, and that could be core, let's say, or gross motor issues in that sense. But being able to hold yourself in a chair all day, being able to stand correctly while you're holding a school bag, all of those things can be impacted greatly, which obviously has more of a stress on your joints and muscles as you get older. And then dysgraphia. So our main kind of top tip for students with dysgraphia is obviously to move away from the handwriting piece as soon as and as early as possible. So what is happening more in the education space is students with dysgraphia obviously are learning how to touch type an awful lot quicker, and they're getting particular typing programs, they're implementing in school, doing it at home. Lots would have thought before, like, sure, we'll just practice the writing and hopefully it'll get better, and that's generally kind of not the case. It still doesn't improve any way, shape or form. It doesn't mean that their handwriting is always going to be illegible, it just means large quantities of handwriting can be very challenging. So definitely moving to more towards a speech to text format software where you dictate into a computer screen, There's a fabulous range of assistive technology, some we'll get to in a minute, that can really help in this space instead of trying to consistently handwrite when it just, doesn't really get any rewards from it. Some common classroom strategies, so again, these can be kind of used at home as well, so they're not perfectly synchronized in terms of a classroom base. Font size is really important, so I suppose there would have been dyslexia font, let's say, come out over the last number of years, and it being kind of like, I suppose, seen as the next fabulous thing. This can be very subjective, is my personal opinion on it. We have lots of students that Google dyslexia font, download it onto their Word document and find it useful. Others don't really. It can kind of look maybe slightly childish, especially in a workplace context. Generally speaking, these will be our two main fonts that we will use for students with learning differences. Less like calligraphy based, so we want to create it as clear and legible as possible. Limiting white backgrounds, colour overlays. So this is still anecdotal in terms of having fully been scientifically proven, but colour overlays are basically like if you've got a colour plastic sheet, and if I put it over like your white sheet here, so imagine it was like slightly shiny and it's kind of like pink or purple, it goes the full way over the sheet, and it just creates a different gradient, but the interpretation is slightly different. Similarly to that would be in coloured lenses. So coloured lenses would mean a slight tint in a lens for a student that may help them with the interpretation of words, may help them with the whole environment of the space that they're in. Headings, subheadings and bullet points. So format structure obviously is essential if a student's doing a test or doing an exam, as that's the main form of our curriculum system at the moment. So trying to understand how do we position a question and how do we understand what we're writing as an answer is vital. Limiting red pens, which really has been massively limited due to the pandemic, and most teachers are correcting things online, so thankfully red pens isn't used as much as it was. One instruction at a time. Speaking slowly, not loudly, unless there's any hearing differences that, we're not aware of any hearing deficits with learning differences, but often there can be a misconception that if we speak louder, they'll understand it differently. That's really not the case. Visual cues, movement breaks, thankfully are becoming more and more common. So moving around, stretching your legs. I know you're all sitting today, my apologies, but feel free to move around if you like. Movement breaks can be really, really good and create kind of more movement, and then obviously activating the brain. And then ongoing feedback. So to a student that maybe is doing something incorrectly for a consistent amount of time, okay, how are we illustrating that feedback to them, and what do we need to change that might click differently or might set with them in a different way. Some key strategies for writing. So obviously again, this is if a student doesn't have dysgraphia, so if they have just wanting to improve their handwriting in general. So planning, mind mapping, there's a specific mind map approach for students that have learning differences. So generally speaking, a traditional mind map, draw a circle and draw all the lines out of it, doesn't really work. We do a video on this on our social media site, and it's also on our website, as to it needs to be laid out usually in a succinct format so that we learn it in a chronological order. So generally what you want is you want your circle, you want your introduction, you want your middle bits if there's examples, and then you kind of want your conclusion. So you're usually going in a clockwise fashion. Just drawing a load of random words outside of a circle can often make it actually even more confusing than what it was previously, because you can't learn it in a particular order. Coloured pages, that becoming great. I see lots of students using coloured pages in the school context. Yes, that might not or may help. People have a preference towards different colours. There isn't a lot of evidence to say, well, if they get the yellow notebook and do their maths and that will make a life difference. It might not, but it also might, so it's just kind of one of those small things that can be a trial and error approach. Coloured pages, visual storyboards, layout draft attempts, as we were saying, and then obviously typing if needed, which is usually probably the best approach in that sense if approved. Okay, everybody all okay? You're all with me? I know we're going at a rapid fire phase. So assistive technology. So does anybody here use assistive technology? Great, you might be asking what you have.
iPad for typing and stuff, right?
Very good, perfect, great. So there's a vast range of assistive technology thankfully coming to market. Obviously we're in a technology bubble, so there'll be more and more things coming to light. There's probably, I think now, over like 1 million apps that will help with different forms of learning and different forms of maths and curriculum based. I suppose it really is subjective to the student themselves. So I suppose first and foremost is how comfortable they are with overall technology, using an iPad, using a laptop, and how much their skills can be developed on that, because the more comfortable they can become, the more easier it is to use. These will be just some of our kind of, main suggestions in a sense. It's not limited to this list, and obviously there's so many more pieces of software that are used in school, and there's so many more things that can be used. But read and write is the kind of like classic initial piece of technology that was illustrated and kind of came out first in terms of the school context. It was helping students understand and read lots of text on a computer screen, highlight bits and pieces, and read it back out to them. So a student maybe with a learning difference might have gotten a reader in a traditional exam context, both in their junior cert and leaving cert, and read and write basically kind of helps with that. It will read the text format back out to you. LiveScribe is one of the coolest pieces of technology that I've come across, and it's still not kind of that readily available over here as probably what it would need to be. This is very useful for people very much in a note-taking context. So in a school classroom, particularly in a university, unfortunately, obviously we do need permission of people to record, obviously in that basis, so we do need either the school's permission and or the lecturer's permission in a university setting. But it's like a fancy dictaphone in the best way of describing it. You record it, it looks like a pen, so nothing actually stands out, which is the most important aspect. And then you plug it into the computer at home, it'll transcribe notes for you, does lots of things then when you plug the actual pen into the device. So it not only records the audio, but can also do the notes side of it too, so it is very, very useful. Dragging is a piece of technology just for the laptop itself. Dragging is usually quite expensive in a sense, but definitely very, very useful. And it's more of a dictation piece, so you speak into Dragon and it will help you write your whole essay, your whole exam question, help you with homework and those everyday tasks. Natural Reader, browser extensions, note-taking, won't go through all of them, Photomap. Luminosity, I think, is probably one of the key intervention pieces that we would use. So Luminosity is a US-based, kind of like a brain training company, probably one of the first before ever there was the Wii or Nintendo. And there's a free version and then there's a paid version. It's generally catered towards kind of mid-teens to older adults. There's, let's say, a series of 3 or 4 activities that you'll do every day, only for like 2 or 3 minutes, that will help rewire the nerve pathways in your brain. So figuring things out, puzzles, problem solving, kind of like Rubik's Cubes, but not in that type of way. So how you kind of reorganize things on a day-to-day. And each day they'll send you an email, give you a new 2 or 3 tasks to do, and can be really useful if you still stay in with that link. Again, there's a free version of it, so it doesn't need to be a paid platform by any means. As some of our suggestions from today, we do have an online course program for parents and for teachers to help in the area of learning difficulties. So if anybody wanted any more information, obviously we go through all of these topics that we spoke about in a lot more detail. So in the program, it's looking at more writing strategies, math strategies, how to save time during homework, how to prepare and study for exams, and then some of our top essential tips as well for organisation. So our overview. So a little bit of overview on learning differences, competence school and homework, strategies. As mentioned, we have some of our booklets here, or feel free to get some of them online, and some of our assistive technology we looked at and addressed. Victoria gave out a feedback sheet, if everybody wouldn't mind just taking a minute or 2 to fill it out. Again, if you say if you have any difficulties with handwriting it, feel free. Yeah, no problem. Just give me 2 seconds, I need to